because yeah, Turzai announced his retirement like February. I drove out there for that, and I met oh my god, whoever was running in the 58th in that special election, Bob
Oh,
Croft. I met him.
Bra.
Yeah, yeah, I met him at like this wonderful little restaurant in Smithton. Was it Smithton? Or one this small little mill town, and then Peachman was on the background, and like yes, that was this year, and I have to remind myself of that.
I was at the
Yeah.
Ben Salem special election, so it was March 17th. So that's everything shut down the 15th, and then
God.
we tried to have an election on the 17th. It was terrible. It was one of like the most traumatic experiences of my life.
Yeah, I was working.
We ID'd our universe in that race. ID'd it. So
I was traveling when everything shut down, and it was a really horrendous experience.
Where were you, Ben?
Oh, I was working in the 30th House District, and I was like pretty convinced since like February that there was going to be like a full-on pandemic, and had been planning for like us to stop at some point, and we did, and it just, I don't know. I was like, I'm glad I had my priors confirmed, but this was terrible. Like, it is terrible to be on a campaign and then have everything stop, like all that momentum.
Yeah.
And it was a weird time to talk about politics because you didn't know
really
if you were
weird,
being
yeah.
disrespectful, and people were weird about it. We did a lot of outreach around mail-in ballots, so that was kind of more timely than just being like, I mean, we did some primaries too, and it's like, hey, I know your life's imploding. Do you want to talk about why my candidate should win the primary? Like, let's talk about Dems fighting with each other. That's what everyone's in the mood for.
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
Tone deaf, yes. But no, we have really good candidates too, so it's just rough. They had it the worst, but.
All right.
My wife was 24, just real quick. My wife was 24 hours from getting on a plane to Israel before all the travel stopped. And if it was a little bit different, you know, she'd probably
He would have had to
there.
stay there, yeah. Israel really shut things down pretty quick. I was in London, and I had to buy like 3 or 4 plane tickets back. And I live in Sweden, by the way. So it wasn't really long story. I'm kind of stuck here.
Where in Sweden are you?
I live outside of Malmo, basically. So like about an hour from Copenhagen, in a small town.
Well, it's really.
I've been to Copenhagen and Malmo and Stockholm, so
Nice.
It's pretty.
It's very, yeah. It's about to be very dark.
Yeah.
Should we
let's get
officially
started.
start? Yeah.
Yeah. Does everybody see the recording thing on the top left? We're good? Okay, great. So what I was thinking we'd do is we just, I'm going to start off and introduce it a little bit. I'll add some of that in post-production probably. But then if we could just go around and people could say who they are. And Jordi and I were thinking maybe like as a fun icebreaker, you know, like maybe what have you been cooking during the pandemic or something like that. And then we're going to launch right into it. And we're going to do some sort of more general questions and then get into the regional specifics, and then hopefully end, time willing, with some more like some broader questions about how you're going to watch the race or the races, and just sort of like some last minute thoughts on underdogs and stuff like that. So I'm just going to... Hello, welcome to the show. We're having a bit of a special episode today. We're doing a deep dive on state house races. It's a very special episode. We have some really special guests with us, and I'm so excited for it. And as always, this is Taylor Lightman. I'm your intrepid host of Barnstorming
PA. Hi, this is Jordi, one of the other hosts. We're really happy to have our guests here and bring them into part of what Taylor and I like to call artisanal podcasting.
Yeah, and I should say we're doing an icebreaker. I totally forgot about it, but it's what are you cooking during the pandemic? And I'll say mine is I've been a soup nut here. I've been cooking lots of soup. That's me.
Oh, okay. Let's see. For me, I mean, honestly, one of the nice things about rural PA is we still have our community supported agriculture box. It comes every week, so there's all kinds of goodies. Been eating a lot of BLTs, a lot of tomatoes.
Hi, this is Stephen Caruso. I'm a reporter at the Pennsylvania Capital-Star, and I've been growing basil, so I've been making a lot of pesto. That's been my my quarantine project.
I'm Jamie Perrapato from Turn PA Blue, and it made me realize that I hate cooking, and I cooked a ton. Like, so I have 3 kids too, and I cooked the cooking out of myself, and I don't like it, and I don't want to do it anymore. So that's where I am with that. So I've been doing a lot of takeout.
Are any of the children old enough to start foraging and cooking?
16, 13, and 11.
If they don't know how to make pasta yet, I don't know.
Oh, yeah.
I'm Ben Forstate. I'm a political analyst from Pittsburgh, and I am not a great cook, so I'm just going to say rip and bake cookies. That has been my jam through this pandemic.
Fantastic. So we're going to start off, like I said, more broad, and just from just looking at the big picture here, Republicans currently have about 109 seats. Not about, they have exactly 109 seats, and Dems have 93 seats. And from my basic math, if the Dems manage to flip 9 seats, they can take control of the PA House. Is that right? Am I? Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
So, first question, I think Jordi's going to ask that to Jamie.
Yeah, can I share the screen? You disabled screen sharing. It's okay. Jamie, you might have seen Laura Putnam's research about rural Black Lives Matter, and she's had some maps that I borrowed. And the gist of it, since this is primarily an auditory podcast, is if you look at where in June and July, especially, if you look at where there were solidarity events, rallies around racial justice and in response to the George Floyd murder, it's all over the place, right? And as somebody who spends a lot of time organizing on the ground in rural PA, I'm very aware of how it's changed kind of dynamics in the progressive space. But I was just wondering, since you have such a great vantage point for SEPA and the whole Commonwealth, I mean, do you see that energy translating into anything with politics? What is the question? Are you seeing movement in races that you would not have thought at the beginning of the year? So, take that any way you want. And, of course, no impact is a legit answer too. We're interested.
It has an amazing impact, for all the terrible things about COVID. It's really interesting to be part of such a universal experience. I mean, it's not something that we have as Americans or even across the world that we're all experiencing, like our lives all stopped at the same time. And I think one of the things to come out of that was George Floyd, because that was what it was. That's what you saw. You weren't running to soccer practice or going to the grocery store or going to a concert. You were in your house watching a man being murdered by police as he cried for his mother, and you had nothing else to look at. So I think a lot of people, it was jarring because it was in your face and it was not easy to ignore. And I think a lot of people woke up to it and realized that, while it's political insofar as it deals with elections, it's not political insofar as there's a baseline that's acceptable in this country. And I think that line's moving. And I think people are moving away from, Trump moved them away from party politics. They voted for him because he was not in politics. So, I don't know if the ideology is going to hold tighter than the party affiliation. So that's interesting to see, but I love it. I love the rural counties. I can't wait till we get new lines and I can roll my sleeves up. They are my favorite emails to get. And I grew up in New Jersey, so I didn't even learn the counties, but I have a shirt with all the counties on it that I wear now. But so I got Potter County, they're fierce. They want a bunch of postcards, whatever the rural counties.
Potter County?
Yeah.
Potter County is grounds.
Potter County? I'm like, it sounds great. They're like, can we send them postcards, 1,000 postcards to do whatever they want with? I love them because, I'm mostly in the Southeast. I live outside of Philly and I do a lot of camping and hiking with my kids. So I go, as I call it, the nether. And, it's Trump country. This isn't a little yard sign. This is I'm invested in Trump infrastructure flags or signs are on my barn. And then you have the little like F you Biden signs all over the place where they're like, there's a little engine that could, like, they are surrounded by Trump and you see the Biden signs. And so I think these rural people, the people in these rural communities are like the front lines of it. Like they're just standing up and they'll, you know, face the brunt of what they have to in their counties, and they're the little engines that could, and they're my favorite, and I wish we could get to them more. Like that's my favorite thing to do, but it is fierce. And with these rallies, like you were saying, all over the place, half the time I'm looking them up and it's the middle of nowhere, you know, and you wonder if they even have communities of color in most of these places. Probably not. So
I can tell you, I was at an event in Troy, Pennsylvania, which is in Bradford County near the New York State border. And it is literally 98% white. It's whiter than where I live, which is 90% white. And there were over 120 people in the park, and there were 2 people of color. But in terms of, you know, the little engine that could, you're going to love this. So the Union County Democrats, where I live, built their own billboard basically and erected it. And then yesterday they had 6 people out erecting a 28-foot pole with a big camera, like to keep a camera on it.
It's just fight. Like, we got to fight everywhere. He won by 44,000 votes. We have to win by a landslide, because all this stuff with the ballots and all the bullshit and everything like that, you know, all these hours I spend on calls, you know, like, what if you're not filling out your ballot while standing on one leg with a blue pen in the winter solstice? Like, it's just exhausting. And hopefully we'll be like, wow, we wasted a lot of time on that because we won by a landslide. And that's what we need to focus on. And to win by a landslide, it's going to be these rural counties. It's going to be these people who are like, I've had enough. Like, that's how their turnout was.
Sure. Taylor, could if we have time, if Ben or Stephen, you know, either from your perspectives, from the analyst or the reporter, do you see that I call it the rural Black Lives Matter, like, has you seen that filtering into what you're paying attention to?
I guess I would say, just from a Harrisburg perspective, you know, Black Lives Matter protesters, lawmakers took over the rostrum, and Mike Turzai, arch conservative, went up and was like, you know, I hear you. And look, without getting into we could go back 4 years, 6 years and point out all the things Republicans haven't done. We could talk about, you know, just in general, the way the legislative process mucks things up. Like, the fact of the matter is, Mike Turzai went up and said, look, I saw that video too, and they pushed through police reform. And it's a small reform. There's so much more that I think activists want to see done. There's going to be more to come on that after the election that needs to be looked into by us reporters. But I think that only happens because a lot of people who weren't paying attention to Black Lives Matter in politics all of a sudden had to pay attention to it. I would sometimes talk to rural lawmakers who, like Republican lawmakers, who kind of were like, yeah, I saw the video and I wasn't cool with that. So, you know, if even the Republican lawmakers were paying attention, I'm assuming that the like rural Democrats, especially, you know, Laura Putnam's work kind of speaks for itself, that huge map of all these protests. Like, I don't see how it's not kind of taking over our rhetoric in some ways.
Yeah. Let's go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that, like, it's interesting because a lot of these counties are places where you did not see a lot of organizing or a lot of activism. I mean, you can speak to that even better than I can, prior to 2016. And these protests are just another focal point for groups in these areas to build capacity, to find like-minded people who maybe want to get involved. It's another entry point. The more capacity you build in these areas, the more local people you have going out doing this work, the stronger, you know, the stronger the party gets in these areas. So I think we're going to see some, you know, upstream effects from all of this.
Yeah, I agree with that, Ben. I think it's definitely going to have, like, perceivable impacts, at least on the presidential race and the row offices. I fear that the state house is just way too gerrymandered for any of this to have, like, an immediate impact. You wrote recently, Ben, that there's a Blue Mountain that kind of extends from Lehigh Valley all the way down to the collar counties. And you said inside the Blue Mountain, we can expect some movement towards the Democrats. And then outside the Blue Mountain, with the exception of Allegheny County, like, it's just going to be a sea of red. Is that, like, how you're perceiving this? Am I misinterpreting your Blue Mountain wrong?
So it's the Blue Mountain is like the first ridge of the Appalachian Mountains as you cross the state from east to west, and it goes from the Lehigh Valley, the Delaware Water Gap, essentially, all the way down to the border with Maryland, just west of Chambersburg. You can think of it as, I think it's like 78, 81 is the highways. And it basically divides the state between areas that are seeing population growth, that are seeing increases in diversity, increases of young people moving in, and also areas that were predominantly where the economy was traditionally either farming or like secondary manufacturing or like commerce, from areas of the state that are seeing much slower population growth, much lower diversity, and where the economy was basically extractive industries. And like it's just a way to think about this state that is not the traditional east-western divide that we think about. Increasingly, politics in the Northeast, in Scranton, Wilkes-Barre, look like politics in the Southwest, or look like politics in Erie, where you have cities. So it's not just Allegheny County, but like places like Center County, Erie, Scranton, Monroe, even, Union and like Montour are a little different. But it's less that we're going to see a sea of red, in that Democrats are kind of fighting an uphill battle in a lot of these areas where the party infrastructure is not as great, where the demographics are not as good for Democrats in these areas, and where there is still, where the generally people have been moving away from the party in these areas. Now, if this was a normal election, we'd probably continue to see like a lot of red. But some of these polls lately have just been eye-popping, and I don't think Joe Biden is ahead by 13% in Pennsylvania. But if that's the case, like all bets are off about what we're going to see. I think, where they stand right now, Democrats are going to have a much easier time in the Southeast, so south and east of Blue Mountain, and we're going to see, not as much movement north and west.
Yeah, go ahead, Jordi.
I love that, Ben, and I love your maps, and as
Thanks.
somebody who was trained originally in kind of social science, sort of traditional sociology, we were sort of trained to not look at the visual, like in the last, I'm old, and in my 40 years, with all of the things that have happened, it's like there's so much richness that you can see there. So it's just always fun for me to see that. And as somebody who's like a son of Greater Appalachia, I grew up in East Tennessee. Like I love what you're talking about. I will say that the Blue Mountain is not a good ski resort. So if people are coming to this, the skiing sucks. But I actually, what was I going to say? Yeah, we see that, right? Like the gains for Democrats are all in like Collier County's Lehigh Valley. To me, there's a lot of post-industrial areas, and at least from where I am in Union County, it's we don't have that same kind of and some of it goes back to even immigration waves. Northumberland County across the river had a lot more coal mining, has a much different political dynamic than Union County. Which honestly, like, this is a fun story. The Catholic Church was only built here in the 70s, right? It was a very waspy town, and that kind of like sociological layering, I think still shapes politics.
It's still valid. Union and Snyder were the two most conservative, to some of the most Protestant, most conservative counties in the state, and mostly are being moved left by the two colleges in those areas.
Absolutely. Also, there's sort of rural gentrification in the last 20 years. A lot of the doctors from Geisinger moved to Lewisburg. Some of them for my cooking, but anyway.
Yeah, Dan, going back on just sort of making our perceived political geography of Pennsylvania, just like complexifying that a little bit. I'm all aboard on that project. Dan Dubé had an interesting tweet where he was talking about how the majority of Pennsylvanians live in these, it's not in Philly and Pittsburgh. It's actually, they live in like these smaller cities like Allentown and Scranton and Erie and, State College and stuff like that.
And Harrisburg.
And Harrisburg, that's right.
Harrisburg, Stephen, maybe there's a good book about Harrisburg. Like I was there for We Can't Wait, which is a statewide racial justice coalition last Saturday. I knew it was a lot of Black and brown folks. It's like 55% African-American. And that right there, I feel like, is such a microcosm of Pennsylvania. The power in the center is the capital controlled by white people, surrounded by a bunch of people who are disconnected from the process.
Yeah. Well, I think with Harrisburg too, a lot of Latino populations, especially here in central Pennsylvania. You look at Lebanon, Allentown, York, Lancaster, even up in Hazleton. Yeah, exactly. The burgeoning Latino populations, people moving here for jobs. I mean, it's kind of funny. I think I almost think of it very similarly to the way that likely like Catholic ethnic immigrants were greeted in Northumberland County or southwestern Pennsylvania, where they went there to work oftentimes union jobs, maybe non-union, mining coal and like doing these jobs no one else wanted to do. Well, Latino immigrants are coming here, and what are they doing? They're working in meat packing plants, particularly. They're taking service jobs that other people don't want to do. And like I'm seeing them as very analogous trends, at least in my mind. Now I say that as just a reporter and not someone with a sociology or history degree, but they seem analogous to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. Going back to something you said, Ben, in, the polling for Pennsylvania just in the past 2 or 3 weeks has been definitely problematic for Trump. I also saw it was a Quinnipiac Biden plus 13 poll or something like that. But part of me is really worried that do you guys think that like a Biden blowout necessarily translates to wins at the state house? Or because Wolf won by like 17.
It definitely does not. Okay. Because if you're talking about, like, I hate the national polls. They drive me crazy for the work that I do. Like, he's not up 13 where I am. No. Like some of the places, like in the Southeast, it's crazy. We've all talked about that. That was trending a different way. It was a different type of Republican in the Southeast. It was more like the fiscal Republican. And now, starting 2018, they're like, I'll pay taxes. Like, that's fine. In these other areas, it looks a little different, because of the geography here. So we have races like Dauphin County's one, NEPA. In those areas, like, we're struggling to, keep Biden close or up by a little. Like, it's not, this big 13-point swing it's not where we need to be. Other than the Southeast and, some pockets in the West. But, these are tough places that we're working. I mean, they were gerrymandered that way. The gerrymander gets tighter to break the closer you come into the red parts of the state. I mean, there's just nowhere to wiggle. And, that's what's important, is cutting the margins in those areas. If we're getting killed by 20 points or 30 points, we got to lose by 15 points. And that adds up. And that's what people have to show up. And I don't know if these are going to be permanent Democrats or just anti-Trump voters. I mean, for this cycle, who cares? But, going forward, I think, in these areas, if they want to see change, they have to define the party as whatever they want. I mean, I kind of think, the Democrats still have a party, but I think, people are just going to have to define it different ways. There's Democrats in Pennsylvania that aren't, Democrats that people in the Southeast would feel comfortable with, but they vote with us on the big issues. So I think you're going to see that. And hopefully people, because of George Floyd, because of all the stuff that's happening in this reality show that we're all living in, are awake. And you realize, like, that weird surcharge on my water or all this stuff that's happening around my house, I have to do something about it because there's nobody doing it. And if you've had the same people in power where you live for the whole time you've lived there and it sucks, like, you have to be the one who does something about it, because most people aren't even thinking about it, and now people are thinking about it. And I hope that we see a progression into a more active political engagement, or however, social engagement, in these rural communities, now that people, as you said, are able to find each other because there's these events. Like, where were we going before?
Yeah. I'd really like to get in.
We were all in the corn maze, Jamie. We were all in the corn maze.
We're all in the corn maze.
We were lost. We couldn't find each other.
Yeah. It's
not like politics is on the forefront of people's conversations, especially if you don't agree with the common thread.
Yeah. I'd really like to get into some regional specifics and talk about some individual races. And I'm hoping we can start with Allegheny County and sort of like Western PA. And I have like written down here like a number of races that I think are going to be close. We certainly don't have enough time to talk about all of them, but I'm just curious, open question, what races are you guys looking at in Allegheny County? I know, Ben, you were working in 30th, but any flippable races here, guys?
Someone else want to start?
Oh, I mean, I feel good about
Ben?
it. I mean, I feel good about Emily Skopov. I feel good about Lissa Geiger-Schulman. Michelle Knowles running a really tough race. Like, we have a path. Like, I do not understand the West. I will be the first to tell everybody I don't get it. Like, I don't always play in places I don't understand, and I don't understand Allegheny County, but we have great candidates that I believe in. You know, we supported Pam Ivino, and it's like a lot of these like fierce, awesome women. So it's not a heavy lift for us to get involved there, and they're killing it. You know, maybe somebody else can kind of speak to the landscape of that. Like, I feel like I can kind of explain Bucks County, which not a lot of people can do. That's its own weird animal, but like Allegheny and a lot of the Western counties, we're fighting there.
I like to think of Allegheny County for people from the Southeast as like outside the city of Pittsburgh is basically Bucks.
That makes so much more sense.
Yeah. So our suburbs are older and they're whiter.
Can you explain that, Ben? Because that doesn't mean anything to me.
So Bucks County is, I mean, you can correct me if I'm wrong because I'm from the West, but Bucks County, unlike the other collar counties, is whiter and a little bit older. And a slightly lower median income than the rest of them. The base in Bucks County for Democrats was traditionally, white working class voters in lower Bucks County, around Levittown, Bensalem, those areas. And so that's why it's swingy. You have a huge group of white working class voters who traditionally voted for Democrats. And then you have more like exurban kind of, white collar voters in central Bucks County around Doylestown. And so they're both moving apart at kind of similar rates. So you end up close to 50-50. Without the city of Pittsburgh, Allegheny County would be around 50-50.
Right. Like in Lower Marion, like in Montgomery County, you have Lower Marion, like, where they get your votes, the Swarthmores, things like that. Like, you need every vote across Bucks because Lower Bucks is essentially Northeast Philly. So that's, if you think about it that way, then you have rural, and then you have, some wealthy upper class neighborhoods that are, some of them are the fiscal conservatives that I mentioned earlier. Some are like, ideological conservatives. I mean, we have a school board up there that doesn't want Obama in the history books, things like crazy stuff,
Yeah.
But so you don't ever have like the spot. Where like you get your Dems. Like you got to scrape out everyone.
We didn't in Allegheny County. I mean, there aren't as many in the suburbs. So you are kind of fighting again against demographics in Allegheny County. Our suburbs are older and they're whiter and they're a little bit more traditional than suburbs in other places around the country. Like Philadelphia or other places where Democrats have been extremely successful, like outside of Washington, D.C., there just aren't as many young people, or they're not as diverse. So you are kind of dealing with populations that have been there for a while. So, like you mentioned, there's 3 state house races in Allegheny County that are competitive. The 44th, which is our western suburbs, including the airport. So that's Moon, Quaker Valley, Swickley. 28, which is Wexford in the north, and 30, which is my home district. And that is Route 8 plus Fox Chapel. So that's also in the north, and Shaler, Glenshaw, if you know the area. And all 3 of them are going to be very competitive. They include, all 3 of them include different types of different groups of people who, it's going to be interesting to see how they go down ballot. It's a mix of white working class voters and, upper class voters. So that's, again, why Bucks County is close. That is why these districts are going to be close.
And if I can just jump in, the way like you're talking just statewide. The way I think about this is, as Jamie was saying, with like Biden numbers, the problem for Democrats in trying to flip the House is they have to net 9, and that the net is super important because. So yeah, you have these interesting suburban seats that are going to be really competitive. Republicans freely admit they're not doing as well in the suburbs, but at the same time, the Democrats are trying to win these suburban seats. Joe Paterka, have any of you heard of Joe Paterka? He's in this part of Westmoreland County that if I showed you on a map, you probably wonder how is there a Democrat still there. You have Jerry Mullery up in Luzerne County near Hazleton. You have Pam Snyder in like an old coal country seat. You have a lot of Democrats who are hanging on in these Trumpy seats.
And then Neil Goodman seat.
Outright. Yeah, Neil. I mean, and that's an empty seat. I mean, that's an open seat.
Like I counted as 10.
Yeah, exactly. Like that seat's like very, very likely to flip with Goodman not on the ballot. So there's just like Democrats are, and that's why like the Biden number is maybe helpful in the Southeast, but the Democrats also need people to run 10, 15, maybe even 20 points ahead of Biden in some of these districts in order to win. So like Biden is, that's good for presidential numbers if you're a Democrat, but it means very little about composition of the legislature.
And in some of these areas, our Dem is outperforming Biden because they're used to them. So you're fine as a Democrat because we know you and whatever, but we'll never see a Democrat there again. And they're definitely outperforming Biden.
Once they retire.
Yeah, I think
they retire.
The Frank Burns seat, that's the Colin Peterson effect.
Oh, yeah.
Like he'll probably hold on to it just because he's got some sway.
They got the when we got rid of straight ticket voting, it was kind of a mixed bag. But I think for some of these incumbents, it helps because it forces people to actually, go down the ballot and consider them and say, you know what, I know them. I might not like Democrats, but I like my state representative.
Well, I know this is not my podcast, but I would like to ask you a question because I'm always fascinated about it, which is Bucks County, is the effect that Fitzpatrick has on us up and down the ticket.
That's
my nugget. That's my holy grail that I'm always wondering.
That's one I've considered quite a bit in like a lot of my analysis. Running good state rep or running for good congressional candidates has a huge effect. And in 2018, when Scott Wallace ran, he ran somehow about 10 to 11% behind Wolf when the average for congressional candidates was about 4%. And that likely cost Democrats at least a state Senate seat and 2 state House seats.
Oh, yeah.
Bucks. When people split tickets, I think, and I have to look up the research on this, it causes them to split tickets further down the ballot as well. So it's important to run a strong slate of candidates.
And he's just like a juggernaut. He has so much money. He sent out a mail piece that was a hologram of Chris Finello, and when you moved it, it was Nancy Pelosi.
Wow,
that's a great piece.
I'm dying. I'm trying to get it. I want it.
Expensive.
Oh my gosh.
I have a video of it, but I don't have the piece.
That's super cool.
I want a hologram of myself with Nancy Pelosi.
I think the thing about Jamie, the thing about having some people who've been organizers like Taylor and me run a podcast is that it's not our podcast, it's your podcast.
Okay, I'm just bossy sometimes.
The communist podcast hosts.
Nobody ever wants to talk about this stuff. This is like my dream come true. I love it, and then I have you guys on here. I'm like, this is great.
But go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, if there's one race where Biden's coattails are going to be important, at least at the congressional level, it is in the 1st congressional district.
Where is that for the uninitiated?
That's Bucks County. It is Bucks County and a little sliver of Montgomery.
We have 4 flippable seats in Bucks.
It is the key to the state house. It is one of the races where Republicans, it's one of the places in the state where Republicans down ballot seem to run far ahead of the top of the ballot. Regardless, you have a lot of, I know Stephen and I have talked about this, a lot of labor Republicans in Bucks County. Yes. It's like the holdout for labor Republicans in the state. So Republicans who generally support labor issues. And it's just it's like a nut that Democrats have not been able to crack.
Well, and I think those are like smart reps there. Like
Yeah.
when there are defections on votes, and I'm not saying these are defections that sink a bill or not, but like a lot of times it's coming from Bucks County Republicans. A lot of times it's you have abundance of like if you're going to find pro-choice Republicans, pro-labor Republicans, pro-environment Republicans, they're likely going to be Bucks. There are a few other examples. Todd Stevens and Tom Mahaffey can have their due. But most of a lot of times those Bucks Republicans, like if they withhold their vote from, say, a bill, this is an example, a bill to allow fracking in the Delaware River watershed, that blocks the bill and it's not going to move. And that is like they kind of varies. I think legislatively they know how to use their power, and I think that seems like it's a big part of their message about, hey, this is why if you're voting for Joe Biden, make sure you vote for Frank Ferry.
Yeah, I mean, I can just from the numbers, it seems like there's probably 10 or 15 or 8, maybe even more seats in SEPA that could really flip, and it's puzzling to me why this is even a question. And for what it's worth, we have a forthcoming interview with Nancy Ginst, she's in a really good race down there. I think she'll probably eke it out.
And she has I think she has a libertarian, doesn't she? She has a third party.
That's good.
Jill Dennon has a libertarian, and I think that Nancy has a third-party candidate too.
This has been fascinating. I don't follow all of these races and the whole state picture as much, so I think this is like a great composition. I was wondering if I'm sort of looking at Taylor to cut me off on this, but like one of the things as I was listening to you all that I think is really interesting from my perspective is like if we go back to the gerrymandering in 2010, 2011 to now, this status quo in Pennsylvania for a long time, which seemed to be about what I think, Stephen, you were saying, that you could have Republicans who would break from Republican ideology, and you could kind of have an old school bipartisan effort in Harrisburg. Gerrymandering itself, the hypothesis in my mind is that the gerrymandering process the Republicans engaged in to protect their majorities actually undermined their ability to sustain that, because gerrymandering, from my perspective, makes party discipline easier for the party bosses to control. And the heads of the Pennsylvania, the leaders of the Pennsylvania GOP are all from the very red areas where we are, and are much more like susceptible to like the ideological stuff. Corman and Gordner, who are right around me in the Senate, and I don't remember the PA House. But anyway, I'm just wondering, if you all have any thoughts about that, right? Like in the sort of 10 to 15 year perspective, has the very effort by the GOP to hold on to power using gerrymander, even as they're losing the demographic thing, made it harder for them to actually execute legislation that protects their moderates? Does that make sense?
Yeah. I'll try to just be really quick, which is like, I think that we're seeing that now, but for a while that model worked. I mean, because the leader wasn't like Turzai, who is he's an ideologue in some sense. I mean, he has ideals he wants to stick to. You had John Purcell, who was he was from Northeast Philly, and he was the Republican head. And he was a guy who traded this vote and that vote to get money for his district and do whatever he needed to do. Like we didn't have ideologues in the PA House or the PA General Assembly overall. I mean, in the mid-2000s, there was a pro-choice Republican from Blair County, Altoona, who was the Senate pro tem. Like, we didn't have these like people who kind of hemmed the party line. But then you add in, so in 2006, you have the pay raise, you get Obama elected, you get the Tea Party, you have gerrymandering, and you see the loss of then these rural Democrats too, who were, like kind of the analogs of these Southeast labor Republicans who just sort of had, ideologies that could be molded for a compromise. Like just the bottom fell out of those like squishy middle ground votes that you could pull from if you were trying to get a grand bargain on education, on transportation, on any of these topics.
There's just been a lot more ideological sorting over the last, like if you are pro-choice, you are in the Democratic Party. If you want, right to work, you are a Republican, which, wasn't the case in the past. And also it's also the case that like gerrymandering in order to keep the Democratic Party in certain seats, it wasn't, not every single seat in the PA House was gerrymandered with that purpose. There is a lot of incumbent protection as well. A lot of trading to get better seats. So parts of the state are gerrymandered as we traditionally think of them. Other parts of the state the map was done to protect incumbents, particularly I think in the Southeast, a lot of the seats in the suburbs there could have been quote unquote gerrymandered better, but instead reps were essentially given the voters that they wanted.
The districts down here are so crazy that, like, I think there's one place that you can go in Ardmore and have like 4 House districts. Like, it's like there's a little spot. It's nuts. Like where I am, I don't even know who. I'm Pam DeLessio, but I'm Lower Merion, so I think she has like a mile of Lower Merion, which I think gives her vote because she has trouble in Philly. So like and then Tim Briggs has one side of the street, and I think Vitale has the other side of the street. Like what bar, one bar is in Tim and one's in Vitale. Like it's just.
It's weird because it's like these seats are made for reps who might not be there 10 years later. So they're gerrymandered, but not in this traditional way that we think about gerrymandering, as in we are trying to so some are. I think a really like clear example for people when we think about like traditional gerrymandering, where Democrats are packed into small seats, and they're like kept in one small area, is the Lehigh Valley, where Democrats are basically confined to seats that are in Allentown, Bethlehem, and Easton, and the suburbs are kind of like split into these like very long, narrow strips running out from the cities to connect them to rural areas. Whereas like in the Southeast, you'll have places just kept a city whole in a district because a Republican was representing it and he's represented it forever. Those are his voters. Failed in the Southeast in 2018, partially, and why it held up super well in the Lehigh Valley.
What do you mean it failed?
So, I mean, you had almost all the gains Democrats made, all of them were in the state house, were in the collar counties.
14 seats we picked up.
You mean the intended consequence of the gerrymander? I'm like, the gerrymander is still there. The lines are there.
The lines are there. The intended consequence was to keep Republicans safe. And part of that's demographic change. Part of it is just, not splitting up these areas as effectively as they could to, keep Republican seats, because they were made for specific incumbents and not with an ideological purpose.
And the ideology doesn't fit in the suburbs.
Yeah.
It just won't. Like even the conservative part of the suburbs are not as conservative as the red parts of Pennsylvania. So that's why Pennsylvania is such a tough place, because you have red and blue and, a lot of geography. So it's kind of really hard to come or what, because I'm curious always to see how this self-corrects after. Are these people Democrats now? Or are they just waiting for some sort of Republican Party to emerge back? Or it won't, or I don't know. So I think I think what's next is going to be really fun. I'm excited.
Something I want to ask you guys about, and this comes from both Jordi and I are from SenPen. What do you guys think about the Lewis Rodas seat? I mean, I think Di Pasquale is going to be he's going to. I don't know if he's going to win, but I think he's a strong candidate. And I'm curious if you guys see this seat flipping. What are the dynamics there that you're looking for?
If I may take lead, I am Harrisburg. And I think a lot of eyes are on that seat because it was really close last cycle. Important caveat for last cycle. Democrats had a very local candidate, Eric Epstein. They were running in an open seat. So if you have this locally known person plus a seat where there's no incumbent, easier to flip. Andrew Lewis is now an incumbent, so that's a bit harder. But if you're going to take anyone out, you usually beat them in their first re-election. And and then you have Brittany Rodas, who I don't know if was as well known as Eric Epstein was. All that said, though, it kind of looks like I think a lot of those suburban districts that have flipped outside of Philly have flipped outside of Pittsburgh, or people hope to flip outside of Pittsburgh. So I think that's probably it looks like a toss-up to me.
I think so too. It's ground zero. I think Dauphin County. One of the things that scares me, because we do a lot in the the off years, and the fact that Dauphin County is still Republican controlled scares me because it's close. Like that's a close district. So we don't control the BOE there. So what do they have? One drop? How many drop boxes you guys have? One? A half of one? That's like one drop box. Like that's the kind of stuff that that happens when we don't control the county, because they just suppress the crap out of the vote. So when you have those tight races, like the Lindsay Drew race, like that's a tight race too. I mean, I think she has a shot at Mahaffey. I know he has labor support, but I do think that geography is moving. And with George and Eugene at the top of the ticket, it's a battle. Like if we say the battleground is Pennsylvania, the battleground of Pennsylvania is that area, is that region, I think. And not controlling the boards of elections is scary. It's tight like that. I don't want wake up in the middle of the night thinking about the ballots in Dauphin.
Just for the listener, we switched to a congressional race, right?
I think we're kind of
we're moving in between.
Okay.
I mean,
well, it's all together. They all nestle.
Yeah, they all are linked. We talked about Fitzpatrick and Bucks. All these races are linked together. People tend to vote up and down the ballot increasingly, or they split their ticket, and it's based on the strength of individual candidates at each level.
You'll be voting for, if you're a Democrat, you're voting for Eugene and George and Brittany or Lindsay or Patty. Like and it's crazy.
Flipping the state house basically requires Democrats to pick up seats in 3 counties: Bucks, Dauphin, and Allegheny. I mean, there's other seats they're going to pick up elsewhere, but if we're talking about where there are concentrated geographies of seats they can pick up, it is Allegheny, Bucks, Dauphin. They're individual seats in Montco, or even
but
possibly
one in Luzerne.
One in Luzerne, one in, maybe some of the West Shore seats in Cumberland, 2 of the West Shore seats in Cumberland, maybe a seat in Lancaster, but really it is Allegheny, Bucks, Dauphin. These are counties that are
what did you say, Jamie?
50-50.
Don't forget Claudette.
What about Terezrinsky in Bethlehem? Do you see her as a pickup? Or is that a hole?
That's one of the gerrymanders that's working.
Yeah.
So she's a great candidate, but that's a tough district. She's great though. She's so great.
Full disclosure, Taylor and I are both Unitarians, so she's also a Unitarian. This is my plug. Unitarians, we are about 50,000 people in Pennsylvania, and we have 4 candidates. Terezrinsky,
she's the best. She's the best.
Shauna Danielson, Diane Herron, and Peter Buck. So we punch way above our weight.
Yeah. No,
that's a new fact for me.
Yeah, 4 UU candidates. I think that we should start winding down, but I'm really curious if people have maybe an underdog. Oh, can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
I think they were shocked about my dog jumping into the thing.
Okay. Do you guys have one underdog race or one race that you're looking at, in particular, that you're going to be glued to the DOS screen? For me. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say it's not a state house race, but I always get them confused. The 13th Senate District, which I think is
Janet Diaz, Scott Martin.
Yeah, that I think is going to be super interesting.
Where is that?
That is Lancaster County.
Everything
but everything in Lancaster, but the northern parts of it that border Dauphin and Lebanon County.
So that has the city?
That has the city and its immediate northern suburb, Mannheim. This is, if Diaz wins, she will be the first Latina woman in the Senate. And it is going to be a really interesting test to first see how much Lancaster County has shifted because of its suburbs. It's going to be it's going to be kind of one of the first times where PA's Latino population has really figured into a race in some way. I think they get kind of that population gets overlooked when we think about the state in the dynamics. And it is just a place where Democrats have never thought about competing. If you said to somebody even before 2016 that control the state Senate would possibly depend on Lancaster County, they would
we'd be screwed.
Yeah, why bother? But it is she's got a real shot, and I will be watching that race closely.
I'm glad you said that, because Ben also, for maybe this is salient to y'all, but for me on the organizing side, that is a real locomotive for for sort of what I think of as rural populism and redefining progressive politics, not on party lines, but that's where Pennsylvania Stands Up was born in some ways.
Yeah.
With Jonathan Smucker and Jess King's race, and also the apropos of nothing, the farmers market there is amazing. I bought sea urchin there once, blew my mind.
All right, what about you guys? Races that you're going to be watching in particular?
I want to hear Steven says first.
Oh boy. Well, I was gonna say another Lancaster race, but now Ben has claimed Lancaster.
You can double down.
No, I would go with. Sorry, this is two. Steve Menser, which is north of Lancaster, northern Lancaster suburbs, Mannheim. Main reason it wasn't even on my radar, and then he took a weird vote. He voted on a environmental bill in a way I did not expect he would do, and that seems like a vote you do when you're nervous about re-election. Or as Jamie said, or maybe I'll leave Claudette to Jamie if she wants. I think she's an interesting race. I met her in 2018. I think the Poconos are a very fascinating place for Democrats with the people migrating in. So, but Steve Menser, Lancaster suburbs. Interesting, like that is kind of like what Delphin. It's like if Democrats are doing well there, that means we're probably seeing a flip of a chamber. It would be my kind of one of my take, I guess.
Yes, Dana Golick, second run. She's a strong candidate. I thought that was the most flippable of the Lancaster House seats after 2018. Like looking at the Claudette Williams seat, which is the 176. She's Monroe. Transplants, commuters, and I think they have high presidential turnout there, so they'll make more of an effort to get their ballot than they did. She came, it's another county that we've flipped in the interim since 2018, so there's now Democratic control, which I say about why that's so important at the county level and to how these elections go is because it has to do with the accessibility of voting. So if we control the Board of Elections, voting is much more accessible instead of like if poor Steven who has to go probably like a tunnel with like a top secret password to find your one drop box that's only there at a full moon.
We don't.
I like Claudette's race because it's a presidential. I think they'll have like a ton of turnout. I love the 147.
What district is Claudette that you keep talking about? Where is that?
176, Monroe County, and I'm loving the 147.
Where's that?
Marcy Topol. So it's an open seat now. It's Boyertown. So remember, Boyertown was at the center of that transgender school bathroom ban that went to the Supreme Court. And Jill Denon is the candidate there who was on the school board at the time. And they have a libertarian. How the lack of fair funding is really hitting home up there. So I think Republicans are having a problem. And Marcy Topol jumped ship, and 147. I like
she
that
jumped
one.
ship. She switched parties.
No, she's out not being
Republican
anymore.
Oh, I see.
It's interesting that like we could see, Republicans basically eliminated from like some of the collar counties after this election. If they flip those 3 seats in Montco, no more Republicans in the delegation there, almost.
And then 131's an open seat too.
Yeah, there's a few places in the suburbs where they caught a break. Democrats did catch a break. The incumbents retired, which were like really the only reason they were holding those seats.
I was hoping Hennessy was going to retire.
So was I.
Well, there's a lot of campaign ads that rate themselves if your name is Hennessy. So I was wondering, Taylor might get mad at me here, but this has been so fascinating. I've learned so much.
I've learned a lot too. This is.
Do you think we might be able to get y'all back after the votes are counted?
I'll go anywhere these guys are. I want to pick their brain for like hours and hours and hours.
Well, I hope we can do a PA Senate one. Is my hope if you guys are interested.
Before November 3rd.
Maybe if you guys, whatever.
Okay.
We'll pressure you after the podcast.
I don't know if you all are podcast fans. I know Taylor and I really like the Crooked Media a lot, so we emulate some of their things. We do have a couple of questions. We're hoping to. These are a little bit signature issues for us. One is, could I do this one? Like,
Yeah.
if, for example, let's say I become governor, not that I'm planning on it, but if I proposed that the Department of State of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania be changed to the Department of the Commonwealth, right? Not the Department of State. Would you go along with that?
110%.
Okay. And here's the other one.
Yeah.
This one is my pet issue, actually, though.
Okay, you go. Are you going to do landscape?
Yeah. No.
Go for it.
Why on God's green earth are the petitions not in landscape? So you can get all the
landscape.
The petition
Down with portrait orientation.
Yeah.
We want landscape.
Are you guys also, Jamie? You might have more an opinion about this. Having hit the streets trying to get nominating petitions.
Yeah, Stephen may not know what this is since he's probably never circulated a petition.
Oh, I was a layout editor. I know all about landscape and portrait. I take money from the portrait lobby, so y'all are like out of luck.
We're screwed. Here. We don't have our own lobby.
My issue with the petitions is the need to have the actual municipality. People have to sign using their actual municipality when so many people do not know where they live, like the name or they use like their post office location in the address. That is my big issue.
It's very silly.
It's very, where we live, there's Buffalo Township, East Buffalo, West Buffalo. Your mailing address is Lewisburg. People have no idea where they live.
Exactly. It's that upsetting. Need is a pain.
I guess we lost Jamie.
I think we lost Jamie. It looked like her screen was pausing, so I think she might have lost internet connection. Really quickly before we go, because I want to honor your guys' time, the district that I'm looking at is the 85th. Katie Evans versus David Rowe. It's going to be I hope it's a close race, and I. We're keeping our fingers crossed.
Keeping our fingers crossed.
My home district.
Yeah, that's my home district too. Katie ran she did get like 1,100 or 1,200 write-in votes to even get on the ballot in the primary, which was pretty impressive. But that's a long shot.
Are students back in full force?
Yeah,
students are back.
That was the issue in the special.
Which was closer than it normally is, even with that.
I mean, yeah, Union. So, like Union County, like there's a few counties in Central PA that are kind of forming their own little sub-region. It's like Union, Center, and like Montour, like where like Democrats could probably be successful down the line.
And in fact, Ben, you'll love this. Sorry, the upper panhandle of Northumberland County, which no one will understand except you probably, would actually make that a contiguous region. And that upper panhandle is very different from the coal country, which is the southern part of Northumberland.
Yeah, like Sunbury.
Not Sunbury, north of there, Milton.
Oh, yeah, okay. So yeah, and like even a little bit to some extent, like Williamsport.
Yeah, for those listening, I had a great interview. Jordi and I had a great interview with Derek Slaughter, who's the new mayor up in Williamsport.
First black mayor of Williamsport.
Yeah, like William. That area, I mean, it's also from an organizing perspective, that whole area of the state is good because you don't have as many like smaller towns. Like you have like a central town in a lot of these areas, like a large one. And then you do have like smaller towns, but it's like good. Like the central town is a bulk of the population in the county. So if you're able to move people in there, then you're able to move the county essentially.
I think that we were done a great disservice with the gerrymander for the PA legislature one, because if you looked at Mike Hanna's old seat, it was most of Center County and all of Clinton County, and I can totally see him hanging on to that with that district, but it's just totally uphill right now. I think the same thing with our district. It's just
I don't know if y'all would know.
Dam.
Right.
No.
Yeah. I was one of the petitioners in the gerrymandering lawsuit. So I have a very much a good governance side to this. Like, to me, you should try and draw districts that hold together common political interests. And there's a strong argument to be made for what you're saying, Ben, is you draw a district that's the river towns, Sunbury, Milton, Lewisburg, Selinsgrove, Williamsport, that might be too big, right? Which would break up a bunch of counties, but those are actually, people move around there.
Like communities.
Yeah, those are like, and then the more mountainous rural areas, which would throw some of Western Union and Snyder into parts of Center County, that makes sense. And this has nothing to do with winning. Like, I don't have a lot of expectations about winning these as a Democrat. It's just about what would make more sense.
No, I agree with you. And that's actually my preference in redistricting. The PA, there's some, I'm blanking on the word, but there's some restrictions that PA has where they counties
continuous. Contiguous population and I'm blanking.
Limiting splits.
Limiting splits. There's a fourth one.
Yeah. So it's tough to do those types of communities of interest in Pennsylvania.
The limiting splits is really, it's not like counties were given to us by the Lord as, like if you look at Clearfield County, this is my favorite, that line is a river, right? So there's nothing.
And that's also like the different, like the line between Western and Eastern Pennsylvania is like Clearfield, like Cambria, Clearfield.
I would have said it's right through Union County. We've got Eagles and Steelers fans.
That's true.
I feel like it really starts to fall off after State College, but like the core Western PA is that Clearfield split.
I agree with that's that, Western. Yeah.
I'm saying you're in. Yeah.
Guys, it is soda pop. That is the divide. No. It isn't that hard. Don't overthink it.
Is there a map of that? There must be soda and pop.
I'm sure.
I think it starts right around Altoona, Johnstown.
That's what I was just saying.
Yeah, I was disagreeing.
If you're in Altoona, you're not in Eastern Pennsylvania.
I think I'm gonna concede. I think I'm gonna concede. I think that
we're not gonna start on this.
All right.
No, Ben.
All right.
I think Ben is right.
Break it up, guys.
Ben is right. Ben is right.
Let people know where they can find your stuff online. Hear more about your takes.
I'm pretty much on Twitter. My handle is @4, the number 4, ST, and then the number 8. So my last name's Forstate. So it is.
Very good. And you, Stephen?
I am a reporter at the Pennsylvania Capital-Star. That's PE capital-star.com, capital with an A, not an O. And you can follow me on Twitter at Stephen, that's Stephen with PHJ _ Caruso, CARUSO on Twitter. And that's me. Sorry, that's a lot of acronyms.
It's fine. We'll put this in the show notes. And I will say, unasked for, I'm a donor to Pennsylvania Capital-Star. It is one of the most important news sources in Pennsylvania. I encourage everybody to read it and donate. And Jamie had to leave. TurnPABlue.com.
Yeah.
They are fantastic.
Yeah, if you can give some money to them, or if you're invested in seeing the house flip, I think that's the best place to do it. All right. Well, thank you guys so much.